Shalom and welcome to the Ministry of Yeshua. I'm so glad that you're here. Today we're diving into this week's portion, which is called Toldot. We're going to explore its wisdom, its beauty, and how it speaks to our lives right now. Together we'll look at passages from Genesis 25:19 through 28:9, which will connect us to Malachi 1 through 2:7, as well as Matthew 10:21 through 38. And we will start with the summary. In Parsha Toldot, Rebekah is barren for 20 years. Isaac stands opposite her and prays for her. After she conceives twins, the children struggle within her womb. The Lord speaks to her through an oracle, saying, 2 nations are in your womb. The older shall serve the younger. Genesis 25:23. When her term is full, she gives birth first to Esau, followed immediately by Jacob, who emerges clutching the heel of Esau. Esau grows to be a hunter. Jacob is described as a perfect man. Isaac loves Esau. Rebekah loves Jacob. When Esau returns hungry and exhausted from a hunt, Jacob offers to trade him soup for his right as a firstborn. Esau accepts the offer and thus spurning his birthright. A famine forces the family to withdraw to Philistine coast, where the new king Abimelech considers taking Rebekah for his harem, but then realizes she's married to Isaac. Isaac engages in successful agriculture, and the jealous Philistines drive him out, stopping up the Abraham's wells. Isaac reopens the wells, but disputes over water rights continue. Esau marries 2 Canaanite girls. As he feels death approaching, Isaac announces his intentions to bestow the patriarchal blessing upon Esau. He sends Esau off to a hunt for game meat and to prepare a meal for him before offering the blessing. Rebekah, however, overhears and convinces Jacob to go before his father disguised as Esau. Isaac gives the blessing to him, a blessing regarding the inheritance of the land of Canaan and the prominence over his brother. When Esau returns, the ruse is discovered. Weeping, Esau begs his father to reverse the blessing and give it to him, but Isaac cannot. Esau vows to kill Jacob. To escape, Jacob leaves home to travel to Haran in hope of finding asylum with Rebekah's family and finding a wife in the household of Laban. So let's go a little bit deeper. The 6th reading from the book of Genesis is named Toldot, which means generations. It is so named because the Torah portions begins with the following words. Now these are the records of the generations of Isaac. Genesis 25:19. Toldot tells us the story of the birth of Jacob and Esau and their struggle for the birthright and blessing of their father, Isaac. We also learn about Isaac's trials and difficulties in the land of Canaan. The portion concludes with Jacob's deception of Isaac in order to procure the family blessing. The generations of Isaac. Now these are the records of the generation of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Genesis 25:19. Why does the Torah repeat the fact that Isaac is Abraham's son? It says Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Genesis 25:19. Isn't that somewhat redundant? If he is Abraham's son, why say that Abraham became the father of Isaac? Rashi explains that the Torah adds the words Abraham became the father of Isaac in order to counter any scoffers who did not believe that Abraham had actually sired Isaac. He says there were people who claimed that Sarah must have became pregnant through Abimelech. After all, she spent many years with Abraham without getting pregnant, but shortly after she was abducted by Abimelech, she gave birth to Isaac. The Torah assures us that Abraham was the biological father of Isaac. Rashi also mentions that God made the features of Isaac's face to so resemble Abraham's that everyone exclaimed, Abraham begot Isaac. Now we do not know if Isaac physically resembled his father, but we do know that he resembled Abraham in many other ways. Isaac is like a second Abraham. His stories are like the repeats of the stories of Abraham. Isaac's wife was barren, and he depended upon God's miraculous intervention to reverse his wife's barrenness. Like Abraham, Isaac had 2 sons, one rejected for the covenant inheritance and the other chosen. Just as Abraham did, Isaac told Abimelech that his wife Rebekah was his sister. Like Abraham, Isaac was tested by the famine in the land. Like Abraham, Isaac made a treaty with Abimelech and Phicol at Beersheba. And just as Abraham did, he dug wells. Though they turned out to be Abraham's original wells, he even named the wells the same names that Abraham named them. So just as God appeared to Abraham and gave him the covenant promises, he appeared to Isaac and gave him the same promises. Isaac is clearly the heir. He walked in the spiritual inheritance of Abraham. Now Isaac prays for Rebekah. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord answered him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. Genesis 25:21. Just as Abraham's wife Sarah was barren, Isaac's wife Rebekah was also unable to bear children. For 20 years she and Isaac tried to have a child. Now it is normal for a couple to desire children, but for Isaac it was critical. He was the inheritor of the great promises given to his father Abraham. If he did not have children, those promises could not be passed on to the next generation. Isaac turned to the Lord and entreated him on behalf of Rebekah. Now the Talmud says, "Why were our ancestors barren? Because the Holy One, blessed be He, longs to hear the prayer of the righteous." Rashi makes two notes on the Hebrew wording of Genesis 25:21. When it says that Isaac prayed, it uses the word that implies entreaty. Rashi explains that this means Isaac persistently prayed on her behalf. Now we can assume that Isaac had been praying throughout the 20 years of her barrenness. That's a persistent prayer. Yeshua teaches us to pray persistently. He said persistent prayer can be compared to a widow who continually entreated the local judge to hear her case. Though the judge neither feared God nor respected man, he decided to hear her case lest she wear him out with her nagging. If persistent entreaty works on an unjust judge who neither fears God nor man, how much more so will the just judge of the universe be moved to answer our entreaties? Yeshua told a parable about the power of a persistent prayer as well. He compared it to a man who needed to borrow food from his neighbor to feed an unexpected guest. But his neighbor had already gone to bed. The man continued to entreat his neighbor until the man eventually got out of bed and gave him what he needed. If persistent entreaty works on a lazy, reluctant neighbor, how much more so on God, who neither slumbers nor sleeps? Now Yeshua also encouraged us to pray persistently, saying, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you." Luke 11:9. Rashi makes a second observation on the Hebrew wording of Genesis 25:21. He notes that the Hebrew says that Isaac entreated the Lord opposite his wife. And Rashi explains that Isaac stood in one corner and prayed, while Rebekah stood in the opposite corner and prayed. In other words, Isaac and Rebekah prayed together. There is a great power in the entreaties of a husband and wife who commit to praying together. Now, when a friend of ours was a child, I often remember he was telling us that he often fell asleep at night to the sound of his mother and father quietly lifting their prayers to heaven from inside of their bedroom. The Lord heard the prayers of Isaac and Rebekah and answered by allowing Rebekah to conceive. Just as Sarah's conception of Isaac was a direct miraculous intervention of God, so too with Rebekah. Hairy and heel. The Lord answered the prayers of Isaac and Rebekah. She conceived twins, but the babies made bad womb mates. They wrestled each other in a struggle for a privilege of being firstborn. Rebekah experienced considerable discomfort, so she cried out to the Lord. He answered her plea with a prophetic oracle, explaining that she was carrying two nations within her womb. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from your body. And one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Genesis 25:23. Now the Hebrew word for nation is goy. The plural is goyim. In Judaism, the word goy is ordinarily used to mean a Gentile, for example, non-Jew. But it actually means any ethnic group or nation. Therefore, the nation of Israel is called a goy in this passage. The oracle refers to Isaac's two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob will become the father of the nation of Israel, while Esau will become the father of the Edomite nation. When the babies were finally born, the first emerged red and hairy. The second followed immediately, grasping his brother's heel. They named the first child Esau, hairy, and the second child Yaakov, heel. Of course, we are more familiar with the other names Esau and Jacob. By giving Jacob the name heel, his parents were unwittingly contributing to the fulfillment of the prophecy God gave in Genesis 3:15. In that passage, God pronounced judgment on the serpent in the form of a cryptic prediction, and it says this: "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel." Genesis 3:15. This prophecy is like a riddle. The serpent here is Satan. The seed of the woman is the promised Savior, the Messiah. But in the epic conflict between good and evil, between the Messiah and the adversary, the heel will be bruised. Heel is a name for the nation of Israel, because Jacob means heel. God later changed Jacob's name to Israel. The long, sad history of the persecution of the Jewish people proves this prophecy to be true. In the battles between good and evil, the nation of Israel has suffered greatly. The Jewish people have been bruised by the serpent, bruised but not broken. In the end, the head of the enemy will be crushed underfoot by Messiah, the Son of Israel. Fight for the birthright. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a peaceful man, living in the tents. Genesis 25:27. Even before birth, Jacob and Esau were heading in the opposite direction. Esau's inclinations led him toward a path of materialism, whereas Jacob inclined toward spirituality. In the psalm, we are told that the wicked are estranged from the womb. Psalm 58:3. Paul reminds us that even before birth, God chose Jacob over Esau to be the heir of the Abrahamic covenant. And he says, "And not only this, but there was Rebekah also, when she had conceived twins by one man, our father Isaac. For though the twins were not yet born and had not done anything good or bad, so that God's purpose according to his choice would stand, not because of works, but because of him who calls." Romans 9:10-11. The Torah says that Jacob was a peaceful man, dwelling among the tents. He prioritized the family and the family legacy. That is why he earnestly desired the birthright. He wanted to carry on the Abrahamic covenant. He wanted to inherit the promised land. He wanted to walk in relationship with the God of his fathers. But he saw one major obstacle between him and these objectives: Esau. In the biblical culture, the firstborn son of the family received the birthright. When the father died, the family estate was divided into equal shares among the sons. A double share passed to the holder of the birthright. He shall acknowledge the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. To him belongs the right of the firstborn. Deuteronomy 21:17. Now, the significance of the birthright was more than the double portion. Not only did he inherit twice as much as any of his brothers, the firstborn holding the birthright became the new head of the family. He inherited the patriarchal position, authority, and the title of his father. He carried the family name. This can be compared to a business owner who wanted to turn his enterprise over to his two sons. He thought, if I give them both an equal share of the ownership, they will constantly quarrel and eventually ruin the company. What did he do? He gave the younger son a job in the company, but he made the older son the chief executive over the company. That's how the right of the firstborn worked. The greatest position of Isaac's estate was the covenant promises and blessings bequeathed to him from his father Abraham. He planned to pass that covenant and its promises to his firstborn by conferring the blessing over him. Now Esau was the firstborn. That meant that Esau would receive the family birthright and Isaac's blessing. He would be the inheritor of the Abrahamic covenant, and ultimately his children would inherit the land of Canaan. If that had happened, our Bible would not be about Israelites. It would be about the history of the Edomites, the descendants of Esau. Perhaps Jacob would have been content to allow Esau to be the inheritor. As Genesis 25:27 says, Jacob was a peaceful man. Why not let Esau receive his rightful inheritance? Was Jacob jealous? It's not unusual for siblings to feel jealous of one another. Children often vie for their parents' affection, attention, and approval, but Jacob was motivated by more than simple sibling rivalry. He knew Esau was not the right person to carry on the Abrahamic legacy. A taste for game. Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob, Genesis 25:28. Jacob recognized that Esau was not pursuing the things of God. He was not walking in the faith of Abraham. The book of Hebrews tells us that Esau was an immoral and godless person. Hebrews 12:16. How did it happen that the righteous Isaac and Rebekah raised an immoral and godless son? The Torah tells us that Isaac was losing his eyesight. In a spiritual sense, he was blind to Esau's behavior. He loved Esau, it says, because he had a taste for gain. In other words, Isaac's appreciation for Esau's achievements eclipsed any concern he should have had for Esau's spiritual development. If the story were to happen in today's world, we could imagine Isaac delighting in a young Esau's prowess and athletics. He would have put Esau into hockey, soccer, and football programs. He would have pressured Esau to excel academically. He would have cheered his son on as he climbed the ladder of the material success. A good job, a better salary and benefits, a large house, lots of cash flow, and all the money can buy. Materialism is a love for the things that this world has to offer. It is characterized by the drive for success, the thirst for competition, and the need for the esteem of others. Materialism offers the delights and pleasures of the world. Now Yeshua warned that no servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Luke 16:13. A person cannot be devoted to both God and materialism. In one of his parables, Yeshua taught that the gospel of the kingdom cannot survive in the midst of the materialism. He compared it to a seed planted among the thorns. The seed is the message of the kingdom of heaven. Though godliness may initially take root, it is quickly choked with the worries and riches and pleasures of this life, and bring no fruit to maturity. Luke 8:14. To some degree, we all experience this choking phenomenon. We desire to serve God and to live righteous lives, but our material circumstances hamper that effort. We have bills to pay, credit cards, car payments, and other consumer debts that demand our attention and servitude. Meanwhile, we come up with ways to improve our circumstances with a better car, a nicer house, a newer kitchen, better equipment, more stylish clothing, and etc. Our time and resources are limited, and not much of either remain for the service of God. Isaac could have raised Esau differently. Instead of praising him for his material success, he could have shown his approval and delight over the boy's spiritual development. We should praise our children for every selfless act they do. We should shower them with accolades for every effort they make toward godliness. The true test of Esau's character occurred when he returned exhausted and famished from a long day of hunting. Jacob had made a delicious soup. Esau wanted the soup. Jacob offered to sell him the soup in exchange for the birthright. Esau did not even hesitate. He had so conditioned himself to prioritize the tangible and immediate gratification of the material world that he instantly consented. Of what use, then, is the birthright to me? He said, Genesis 25:32. The soup transaction proved Jacob's misgivings about his brother. Esau did not value their father's spiritual inheritance. He sold his own birthright for a single meal. Hebrews 12:16. Abraham's Torah. Now Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Genesis 26:5. The Lord appeared to Isaac just as he had appeared to Abraham. He told him, I will establish the oath which I swore to your father, Abraham. Genesis 26:3. He rested the promise to multiply his descendants, to give them the land, and to bless all the nations through them, because Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Genesis 26:5. Now Isaac was inheriting the Abrahamic blessing because Abraham had merited God's favor. How did Abraham keep God's charge, commandments, statutes, and laws? The commandments of God's Torah, his divine law, had not been given yet. Did Abraham know all the laws of the Torah given through Moses at Mount Sinai? If not, how could he be said to have kept them? Now Rashi claims that this means Abraham kept the entire Torah and the oral traditional law of Judaism. That seems like a stretch, but what does it mean? What laws did Abraham actually keep? Some say that Abraham knew the laws of God because they had been handed on to him through the line of Noah. Other sources imagine that perhaps he had a book written by Enoch that contained the laws that would be given at Sinai. Still, others say that God communicated all the laws to him in advance of giving the Torah at Sinai. Another opinion has it that he kept all the laws he knew, such as the basic laws of morality and stipulations God had revealed, like circumcision. Whatever the case may have been, it is important to note that Abraham's righteousness was not a matter of faith without obedience. Anyone who teaches that observing God's law is contrary to the life of faith should consider this verse. The Bible says that God passed the blessing and promises to Isaac because Abraham obeyed God's law. This is in keeping with what the Apostle Paul teaches when he says, is the Torah then contrary to the promises of God? May it never be. Galatians 3:21. James, the brother of Yeshua, shows that the life of faith results in obedience to God's laws. You see that faith was working with his works, and a result of the works, faith was perfected. James 2:22. Keeping God's commandments is an important part of practicing the faith of Abraham. Isaac's sister Rebekah. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, certainly she is your wife. How then did you say she is my sister? Genesis 26:9. Just as it happened in the days of his father Abraham, a famine descended upon the land of Canaan. The Lord warned Isaac not to go to Egypt for a refugee as Abraham had gone. Instead, he commanded Isaac to remain in Canaan and promised to bless him. In order to remain in the land, Isaac relocated his family to the Philistine territory of Abimelech. Just as his father Abraham had done, Isaac lied about his relationship to his wife Rebekah. Afraid that the Philistines would kill him to take her, he claimed that she was his sister. We inherit both the strengths and the weaknesses of our parents, and often repeat the same mistakes they made. This time, however, the ruse was uncovered. Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, saw Isaac caress Rebekah and challenged him about the matter. Perhaps he had heard the story what had happened to his father, the previous king Abimelech, when he abducted Abraham's wife. He rebuked Isaac, saying, What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. Genesis 26:10. By lying about his wife, Isaac was thinking only of himself. He was showing no concern for the Philistines, not to mention his wife. This story can be understood on another level. Sometimes we feel social pressure to hide our true identity. Some believers might feel embarrassed in certain social situations to be identified as religious. In order to save himself from embarrassment or an uncomfortable moment, a person keeps his faith private. By doing so, however, he places others in jeopardy. People who might have been seeking God are denied the opportunity to benefit from his witness and testimony. The believer who hides his faith shows no concern for others around him. Opening the wells. Then Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the same names which his father had given them. Genesis 26:18. The Lord prospered Isaac while he dwelt in the Philistine territory, but that prosperity incited the jealousy of the Philistines, who drove him out. Isaac returned to the arid soil of the Negev, where his father Abraham had dwelt. There he found that his father's wells had been filled in by the Philistines. Isaac reopened the wells, but each time he did, the Philistines came claiming the well as their own. The modern state of Israel is living out an amazing parallel to these events. Today the Israelis are reclaiming the land of their fathers, digging wells, irrigating the desert, and developing the wilderness of the Negev. They're also experiencing the same resistance Isaac experienced. The modern name Philistine is derived from the ancient word Philistine. The Arab people who bear the name are not actually descendants of the Philistines, but they behave similarly. Just as in the days of Isaac, the modern-day Philistines are contesting the rights to the land. Rather than fight with the Philistine, each time it happened, Isaac moved on and attempted to open a new well. Like his father Abraham, Isaac chose to fight over the water rights. He chose not to fight over the water rights. He simply relocated, trusting God for provision. The Philistines may have been puzzled by his reluctance to fight. Now the Lord rewards those who refuse to quarrel. When Lot quarreled with Abraham over water rights, Abraham refused to fight. He gave Lot the first pick of the land. Immediately after Lot departed, God appeared to Abraham and assured him that all the land which you see, I will give it to you and to your descendants forever. Genesis 13:15. It was as if God was rewarding Abraham's graciousness toward Lot. In the comments on Genesis 13:8, we noted that Abraham's humble behavior was consistent with the teaching of Yeshua. And it says this, "Do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you." Matthew 5:39-42. Isaac's situation grew increasingly difficult. After he was driven out of the Philistine territory, the Philistines encroached on the Negev, pushing Isaac out. Life is full of situations like this. When we are pushed by others, our tendency is to push back and demand our rights. Rarely do we see someone turn the other cheek. Even among the disciples of Yeshua, it is rare to see someone back down from a slight or injury. Clement, the disciple of Peter, advises us to act in a similar manner in order to avoid dispute and strife. He tells the Corinthians that when a person is the cause of some disagreement or strife between the leadership and the laity in the congregation of believers, it is better to leave than to remain as a source of strife. Who then among you is noble-minded? Who is compassionate? Who is full of love? Let him declare, if sedition and disagreement and schemes have arisen because of me, I will depart. I will go wherever you want, and I will do whatever the majority commands. Only let the flock of the Messiah live peacefully with the elders set over it. He that acts in this way will acquire for himself great glory in the Lord, and every place will welcome him. For the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. This is the way that those who live a godly life have done and always will do things. And you can find that in 1 Clement 54, quoting Psalm 24:1. Isaac withdrew as far as Beersheba. There the Lord appeared to him, just as he had appeared to Abraham after the incident with Lot. He came to Isaac in the night and reassured him, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. Genesis 26:24. It seems God was rewarding Isaac for turning the other cheek. The next day, Isaac and his servants were busy opening another well when Abimelech and his men showed up. Here we go again, Isaac must have thought. To his astonishment, however, the Philistines did not claim his well this time. Instead, they announced a reversal of policy and asked for a covenant truce with Isaac. Why the sudden change in attitude? The Philistines explained, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you," Genesis 26:28. The testimony of Isaac's life had an impact on them. They saw that God was with him. Perhaps they noticed that he conducted himself in a godly manner, and they felt ashamed. Things would have probably been different if Isaac had quarreled and fought for his wells. His testimony of peace would have been compromised. He might have been able to keep his wells, but he would have earned a lifelong enemies. Apologies. We have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good and have sent you away in peace. Genesis 26:29. The Philistines asked Isaac for a covenant of peace on the basis that they had done nothing but good to him and that they had sent him away in peace. Isaac must have had to bite his tongue. Nothing but good. Sent me away in peace. Weren't these the same Philistines who had driven him out of their territory? Weren't they the same Philistines who had pursued him into the Negev and taken away his wells? How could they say that they had done nothing but good? Actually, this was how the Philistines apologized for the evil they had done to him and for sending him away in strife. Some people cannot apologize properly. Their ego prevents them from ever admitting any wrong on their own part. Deep inside, such a person knows that he is at fault and that he needs to make some sort of conciliatory effort, but an apology is not even a remote possibility. His pride forbids him. For example, suppose your sister is upset and says some caustic things to you. A few days later you see her again and expect that she is still angry. Instead, she converses with you as if her outburst a few days ago had never happened. You are confused. She was unkind just a few days ago, but now she is speaking to you as if the entire incident had been completely forgotten. This is her way of apologizing. Isaac was willing to overlook the foolish pride of the Philistines in order to make peace with them. So too we should accept even half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. We should not demand a formal apology. Instead, we should be willing to take whatever modicum of peace our adversary offers. Esau's wives. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beri, the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite. And they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah, Genesis 26:34 through 35. When it came time to wed, Esau married two Canaanite women. Esau knew his parents would not approve of his marriage to pagan girls, but he didn't care. He fell in love twice. Esau probably reasoned to himself, "It's my life, I have the right to marry whoever I want. I don't need my parents' approval. After all, I'm an adult. If I'm in love, I should get married." Falling in love is not a good reason to get married. It is possible to fall deeply in love with the wrong person. It is possible to fall in love with more than one person. People often love things that are harmful. The smoker loves cigarettes. The drug addict loves the chemical high. No other decision in life impacts a person's spiritual success as much as the choice of a spouse. It can be compared to a husband and a wife being in a canoe. If they paddle together, both propelling the craft in the same direction, they will make significant progress. If they paddle against each other, attempting to propel the craft in opposite directions, they will go nowhere. If Esau had sought his parents' blessing and approval prior to committing to marriage, they would have steered him away from making a foolish choice. Instead, he disregarded their wisdom and input. He married a Canaanite woman who neither knew the God of Abraham nor cared for the covenant promises. The Torah says that Esau's wives brought sorrow to Isaac and Rebekah. Esau's blessing. Now Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Get up, please, sit and eat of my game, that you may bless me." Genesis 27:19. When Isaac was old and near his deathbed, he prepared to bless his son Esau. Later in the Torah, we will see Jacob do the same on his deathbed. Moses also blesses the tribes of Israel just before his death. The deathbed blessing is sort of a farewell, but it's also a potent prophecy. The book of Hebrews says, "By faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even regarding things to come." Hebrews 11:20. Isaac wanted to use the opportunity to transfer the covenantal blessings he had received from his father Abraham. He intended to give his firstborn son the spiritual inheritance promised to Abraham. There was only one problem. Esau was no longer legally Isaac's firstborn son. He had sold that right to his younger brother Jacob for a bowl of soup. Rebekah was listening in when Isaac told Esau to hunt some game and prepare a meal for the occasion. When Esau had gone, Rebekah convinced Jacob to deceive Isaac for a blessing. Jacob was reluctant, but ultimately agreed to the ruse. Both Jacob and Esau were intent on deceiving their father. Jacob's deception is obvious, but Esau was not being honest either. He should have told his father, "I am no longer the firstborn. I sold that right to Jacob. Give blessing to him." Jacob disguised himself as Esau, brought a dish for the occasion, and deliberately lied to Isaac. Assuming that he was Esau, Isaac bestowed the blessing upon Jacob. As Jacob was leaving, Esau returned, seeking the blessing, but it was too late. Isaac realized what had happened, but he was unable to reverse it. He had already spoken the blessing over Jacob. He could not take it back. Esau wept aloud. He cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." Genesis 27:34. We often do not realize the value of things until they are gone. Previously, Esau had spurned his birthright. He had shown no interest in the spiritual inheritance of Abraham. When it was gone, however, he suddenly realized its great value and was smitten with regret. We are all a bit like Esau. We are so distracted with the material world that we fail to prioritize the things of God. There will be time for God later, we tell ourselves. Someday I will get serious about religion. This can be compared to a man who had a wife and children, but was too busy at the office to invest much time into being a husband and father. Though he had good intentions to slow down and spend more time with his family, it never seemed to happen. The marriage failed. His wife left and took the children with her. Broken-hearted, he entreated her, but after years of suffering and neglect, she would not be reconciled. Only in his despair did he realize that he had missed the important things in life. The writer of the book of Hebrews says this: "When Esau desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought for it with tears." Hebrews 12:17. Jacob's treachery. Then he said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing." And he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Genesis 27:36. Esau remarked that Jacob, Yaakov, was aptly named because he had supplanted him. The Hebrew word for supplanted is akav. When used as an imperfect verb, it is spelled the same as Yaakov. Essentially, Esau says that he is righteously named Jacob because he Jacobed me. The accusation is not completely true. Esau willingly surrendered the birthright, but it does raise the question about Jacob's behavior. Jacob may have had the right motivations in stealing the blessing. It was legally his. Esau was clearly unworthy of it. He needed to protect the Abrahamic legacy. He had all the right motivation, but his method was immoral. This is similar to the situation with Abraham and Hagar. Abraham attempted to help God fulfill his promise to give him a son by taking matters into his own hands. The result was Ishmael. Similarly, Jacob felt that he would help God out by intercepting the covenant blessing. God honored Isaac's blessing and bestowed the covenantal inheritance onto Jacob, but at a great cost. Jacob's life and the lives of his sons might have followed a different course had he waited on God. Who knows how God intended for Jacob to receive the blessing? We will never know. That is the problem with running ahead of God, taking matters into our own hands and forcing our will onto situations. When we fail to wait for God, we will miss the blessings and opportunities that He might have bestowed upon us. As a result of his impatience, Jacob had to flee for his life. He was estranged from his brother. He ended up spending over 20 years exiled from the land of Abraham, which he desired to inherit. And he was actually away for a total of 34 years. Worse yet, the deceiver became and deceived several times over. Just as he had deceived his father, he came to be deceived by his father-in-law. Nevertheless, through it all, God worked out his sovereign purposes. Though Jacob probably did not deserve it, the covenant promises given to Abraham were handed down to him. And that's about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If this message blessed you, please like the video and subscribe. It does help a lot with the message to reach more people who need encouragement and truth. And feel free to follow our Instagram, linked in the comments, for our daily inspiration. May God bless you and keep you. May He shine His light on you and be gracious to you. May He turn towards you